The moment I pushed my suitcase through the front door, that old familiar creak greeted me, and for a second, I felt relief. 2 weeks in Europe had left me drained, my body heavy from travel, my mind craving something simple: home. The house smelled faintly of lavender candles, though I hadn't lit one before leaving. That unsettled me, but I brushed it aside. Mark came into view, smiling, arms open wide, though his embrace felt stiffer than I remembered. "Welcome back, Amanda," he said warmly, but my heart caught on the distance in his tone. "Let's just order pizza," Mark suggested quickly, almost too quickly. I laughed tiredly, rubbing at my temples. "Fine. Honestly, I can't even look at another croissant." We pulled up the menu together on the couch, the ritual oddly comforting. For a fleeting moment, it felt like everything was normal again. I let my head sink onto his shoulder, whispering, "It feels good to be home." He didn't answer right away, and I felt his silence more than his touch. When the doorbell rang, I jumped up, eager to stretch my legs. I smoothed my hair back, though it hardly mattered, and opened the door with a polite smile. I handed the man his cash and added a $5 tip. "Keep the change," I said casually. That's when his lips curved into a smirk. "Only $5? The tall blonde last week gave me 10. My stomach dropped. My smile faltered. Tall blonde? Last week? In my house? The certainty in his voice cut through me like a blade, leaving me breathless at the threshold. I blinked, trying to keep my composure, my fingers tightening around the warm pizza box. "Excuse me?" I asked, forcing a polite tone, though my voice trembled slightly. The delivery man shrugged, unbothered. "Yeah, tall blonde. Opened the door like she owned the place. Recognized it right away. The weird wall color, can't miss it." His words echoed in my ears, each syllable heavier than the last. My mind screamed denial, but my gut twisted with suspicion I couldn't ignore. "Only my husband and I live here," I snapped, my voice firmer now, though my throat burned. His brows rose, and he tilted his head as if he was the one confused. "Look, lady, I'm just saying what I saw. Maybe I got the wrong house, but I doubt it." He gestured vaguely at the walls behind me, smirking again before strolling back to his car. The sound of the engine pulling away left me standing in the doorway, numb, pizza box in hand, my world suddenly unsteady. I turned slowly, my heart pounding in my chest so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. Mark was lounging on the couch, pretending to scroll through his phone, but his eyes darted away the second mine met his. He didn't even ask what took so long at the door. My smile, the one I'd been clinging to all night, dissolved into something colder. That delivery man's careless words had planted a seed, and I felt it take root deep inside me. Something was wrong, and I needed to know exactly what. I carried the pizza into the living room, setting it on the coffee table with hands that shook more than I wanted to admit. "Dinner's here," I said, my voice thin, almost swallowed by the hum of the TV. Mark looked up, his smile a little too rehearsed, and reached for a slice without a word about the tip or the delivery man. The silence between us felt louder than any accusation, filling the room with a tension that clung to my skin. I forced a bite, but it turned to stone in my mouth. Inside, my thoughts spun. Maybe it was all a mistake. Maybe the driver confused houses, faces, everything. But the way he'd looked at me, the certainty in his tone, gnawed at me. And then there was Mark, sitting right there, acting like nothing had happened, his eyes glued to his plate like a child caught stealing. My instincts screamed louder than my logic, and I hated how familiar that silence of his suddenly felt. As the minutes dragged on, I barely tasted a thing. My gaze kept flicking to him, waiting for any sign, any slip, but he avoided me like I was made of glass. And in that avoidance, I found my answer, or at least the start of it. Doubt had already crept in, and it wasn't letting go. I leaned back, chewing slowly, wondering how I was going to bring it up, how I was going to get to the truth without scaring it deeper into the shadows. Later that night, as the house grew quiet, I sat on the edge of the bed staring at the dark outline of the curtains. Sleep felt impossible with that delivery man's voice replaying in my head. Every word tightened the knot in my stomach, leaving me restless, heavy. Mark lay beside me, scrolling through his phone, pretending not to notice the way my breathing had changed. I turned toward him, my voice soft but steady. "So, Mark, tell me again how your week was while I was gone?" He didn't even hesitate, like he'd rehearsed the lines. "Busy, work, gym, the usual routine. You know how it goes." His tone was clipped, defensive, too quick. My heart sank because I'd asked an innocent question, and yet his answer already sounded like a shield. I studied him in the dim light, the glow of his screen flickering against his jaw. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Instead, he scrolled faster, as though hiding behind pixels could erase my suspicion. "Strange," I murmured, tilting my head like I was simply curious, not accusing. "The pizza guy seems to remember a tall blonde coming out of our door. Recognized the walls. Curious coincidence, isn't it?" The words lingered in the air, heavier than I meant them to. He finally looked at me, eyes flashing with irritation instead of surprise. "That's ridiculous. Delivery guys mix things up all the time." His voice cracked at the edges, and right then I knew he was lying, even if he'd never admitted out loud. I didn't argue. I just let his words hang there, floating between us like smoke. On the outside, I stayed calm, but inside, my chest was burning. If there's one thing I've learned in life, it's that truth rarely needs defending, but lies always come with sharp edges. His tone, his quickness to dismiss, it all scraped against me like sandpaper. I swallowed my questions and simply nodded, pretending to let it go, though my silence carried more weight than any fight could. Mark rolled onto his side, his back facing me, signaling the end of the conversation, or so he thought. I stared at the curve of his shoulders, remembering when that same body used to feel like a safe place. Now it was a barricade, shutting me out, daring me to cross. My hands clenched in the sheets as I replayed every moment of his story, searching for cracks. They were there. I could feel them, even if I couldn't see them yet. That certainty settled over me like ice water. The clock ticked past midnight, each second louder than the last, and I lay awake, eyes wide open. The seed of doubt had been planted, and it was already growing roots. I could feel it winding through me, changing the way I saw him, the way I saw us. My heart ached, but my mind sharpened. If he thought I'd let this slide, he didn't know me as well as he thought. Quietly, without another word, I promised myself I'd find out the truth on my own terms. The next morning, Mark moved around the kitchen like nothing had happened, whistling off key as he poured his coffee. I watched him from across the room, studying every gesture, every casual word. He thought the storm had passed, but inside me, the air was thick with unspoken questions. I sipped my own coffee slowly, forcing a smile whenever his eyes met mine. If he noticed the tremor in my hands, he didn't mention it. Maybe he didn't want to see it. "Big plans today?" I asked lightly, my tone as smooth as I could manage. He shrugged, avoiding my gaze, mumbling something about the office and a workout. The same script over and over, like a man desperate to convince himself of his own alibi. I nodded, letting him think I accepted it, but my mind was already racing ahead. If he thought his secrets could stay hidden, he'd underestimated me. I wasn't looking for a fight, I was hunting for the truth. When he left, the silence in the house was deafening, pressing against me like a challenge. That seed of doubt the pizza man planted wasn't just growing. It was spreading fast, twisting into something stronger. Betrayal had a scent, faint but undeniable, and now I caught whiffs of it in every corner of my home. I knew what I had to do. From that moment on, I decided I wouldn't confront Mark with anger. No, I'd gather proof, piece by piece, until the ground disappeared beneath his feet. The first place I turned was the credit card statements. Sitting at the kitchen table, I spread them out like pieces of a puzzle, my pen tapping against the paper. At first glance, everything seemed ordinary. Groceries, gas, the usual. But then, tucked between mundane charges, I found them. Dinners at restaurants I'd never been to, on nights I knew I was thousands of miles away. My throat tightened, my pen stilled. Proof, faint but undeniable, was already whispering to me. I picked up one of his shirts from the laundry basket later that day, meaning only to fold it. That's when it hit me. Perfume, light but distinct, and nothing like the scent I wear. My fingers curled around the fabric, my chest burning with a cold, sharp ache. I pressed it to my face, not because I wanted to, but because I had to know I wasn't imagining it. It was there, a stranger's mark woven into the fibers, mocking me with every breath I took. But rage wasn't what came. Not tears, not screams. Instead, a strange calm settled over me, as if every revelation was fueling a quiet fire in my chest. I didn't want to burst out in accusations. No, I wanted him to feel it, to know that the very life he'd built with me was crumbling beneath him, brick by brick, and that I was the one pulling them loose. Revenge wasn't an impulse anymore. It was a plan forming, sharp and deliberate. I needed perspective, so I called Clara, the one friend who never sugarcoated a thing. We sat at her kitchen counter, mugs of tea between us, steam curling into the air like secrets rising. I told her about the receipts, the perfume, the delivery man's strange confession. Clara's eyes narrowed, her jaw tight. "Amanda, men like him think they're untouchable," she said, her voice low but steady. "Don't confront him yet. Collect proof. Make him choke on it when the time comes." Her words landed heavy, but they resonated. I wasn't weak. I wasn't foolish. I'd been the one holding our home together, and now I'd be the one to take it apart. "I don't want to scream at him, Clara," I confessed, my hands tightening around the warm mug. "I want him to feel the ground vanish beneath his feet when he least expects it." Clara reached across the counter, touching my hand, her eyes gleaming with fierce solidarity. "Then that's exactly what you'll do." For the first time since I returned from Europe, I felt a strange sense of control. Betrayal had stripped something from me, but it had also handed me power I hadn't realized I had. Mark thought I was tired, distracted, oblivious. He had no idea that every smile I gave him now was laced with strategy. And I knew my next step. I had to hear it again, from the source. The delivery man had more to tell, and I was ready to listen. The next time I ordered pizza, I made sure Mark wasn't home. When the delivery man arrived, I greeted him with a smile that felt steadier than I expected. "Can I ask you something?" I said quietly, handing him the cash. He glanced at me curiously, then shrugged, waiting. "Last week, the blonde woman you mentioned, what exactly did you see?" My heart thudded in my chest, but my voice stayed calm, like I was simply chatting about the weather. He didn't hesitate. "She opened the door, handed me the money, laughed with your husband. Tall, blonde, pretty affectionate. I swear she even kissed him right there before going back inside." His words sliced clean through any lingering denial. I felt my face stay composed, but inside, a quiet storm was gathering. Proof. Not rumors, not guesses. Proof. And yet, instead of crumbling, I felt stronger, colder, as if his betrayal had carved away the part of me that once begged for explanations. I thanked the delivery man and closed the door gently, standing in the silence of my home. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't breaking. I was planning. The evidence I had was enough to wound, but I wanted it to destroy. I wanted Mark to see his careful lies unravel in front of him, to watch as the walls of this house, our house, turned against him. That night, as I laid my head on the pillow beside his, I knew revenge wasn't just a thought anymore. It was a certainty waiting for its stage. By then, every smile I gave Mark was rehearsed, every word carefully chosen. He thought the house had gone back to normal, that I'd left my suspicions in Europe along with my jet lag. He couldn't see the calculations running behind my eyes. I waited, biding my time, until the night I ordered pizza again, on purpose, knowing exactly what I was setting into motion. The plan wasn't complicated, but it was sharp enough to cut him where it hurt. When the knock finally came, I looked over at him from the couch. "Honey," I said lightly, tilting my head toward the door. "Will you grab it this time?" He hesitated, eyes flicking to me like he'd just been asked to carry a bomb. Sure," he muttered, rising with that stiff gait that always gave him away. My heart pounded in my chest, but on the surface, I stayed calm, even playful, as though nothing was wrong. I watched from the corner of the room as the delivery man greeted him with a grin that wasn't innocent. "Hey, man, your lady's not here today?" The words hung in the air like a trap snapping shut. I saw Mark's face drain of color, his hand trembling slightly on the doorframe. "What?" I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered, the lie falling flat even before it finished leaving his lips. And in that moment, I knew I had him exactly where I wanted him. I stood then, slow and deliberate, stepping into the hallway where they both could see me. "Oh, I think he knows exactly what you're talking about," I said, my voice cold enough to slice through the tension. Mark's head snapped toward me, panic flickering in his eyes. The delivery man glanced between us, realizing too late that he'd walked straight into my carefully staged theater. I didn't mind. His words were the script I needed. And I had already pressed record before Mark opened that door. Mark's excuses tumbled out in a messy heap. "Amanda, this guy's confused. He doesn't know what he's saying. People mix things up all the time." His voice cracked, his hands waving as though he could fan away the truth. But I stayed silent, letting him dig deeper into his pit of lies. The delivery man shifted awkwardly, muttering something about remembering faces. But it didn't matter. What mattered was that the recording caught every word, every stammer, every bead of sweat rolling down Mark's temple. I felt a strange calm wash over me, as if the last piece of a puzzle had finally clicked into place. He couldn't explain this away, not with his practiced lines or his desperate charm. I had the words captured forever, proof wrapped neatly in sound, and he had no idea what I was planning to do with it. I met his eyes then, steady and unblinking, letting him see just enough of the storm he'd unleashed, but not the devastation still waiting to come. Mark slammed the door shut faster than I expected, his chest heaving like he'd just run a mile. He turned toward me, words tripping over themselves. "Amanda, listen, I can explain. It's not what it looks like." I raised an eyebrow, folding my arms across my chest. His panic was almost pitiful, but I refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. My silence pressed against him harder than any scream could. He was drowning, and I was the one holding the tide. He stepped closer, reaching for my hand, but I pulled back, letting the distance speak louder than my words. "You've been hiding something," I said, my voice calm, steady, almost terrifying in its stillness. "And the funny part is, you thought I'd never find out." His face contorted, half pleading, half terrified, and I could see him searching for the right lie, the one that might save him. But there wasn't one left. The walls had already started closing in. That night, as he paced the living room, muttering half-hearted defenses, I sat quietly on the couch, the recording safe in my phone. Each time he spoke, his voice cracked under the weight of his own guilt. I let him talk, let him trip over his excuses, while I crafted the next step in my mind. He didn't know it yet, but this wasn't just about betrayal, it was about consequences. And soon, he was going to learn that I'd prepared something far sharper than silence. The morning after, I set the stage with the same precision he once used to hide his lies. The papers from my lawyer sat neatly on the kitchen table, beside a steaming pot of coffee. When Mark wandered in, bleary-eyed and still carrying the weight of his restless night, I was already waiting. "Sit," I said softly, almost sweetly. He hesitated, sensing the shift in my voice, but obeyed. He thought this was going to be another argument. He had no idea it was his sentencing. I slid the folder across the table, watching confusion flicker across his face as he opened it. "What's this?" he asked, his voice rough. "It's the prenup you signed before we married," I replied evenly, savoring the moment. "The one with the faithfulness clause. You remember that, don't you?" His eyes darted over the pages, his mouth parting as though he'd forgotten how to breathe. I leaned back in my chair, folding my arms, waiting for the realization to sink in. "You broke it, Mark," I continued, my voice steady, deliberate. "Which means this house, our savings, everything, falls to me." He stammered, muttering half-formed protests, but I cut him off by pressing play on my phone. The delivery man's voice filled the room, his casual confession recorded in perfect clarity. Mark's head dropped into his hands, the sound of defeat louder than anything he could say. And in that silence, I felt something I hadn't in weeks. Power. He looked up at me then, eyes wide and desperate, like a child caught stealing but too old to play innocent. Amanda, wait, we can work this out, please. His voice cracked, reaching for pity, but there was no softness left in me to give. I remembered the perfume on his shirt, the lies he rehearsed, the delivery man's smirk. Every image stacked on top of the other until the weight crushed whatever love I thought I still had for him. I stood slowly, steadying myself on the edge of the table. No, Mark, I said, my voice calm but final. The only thing left to work out is which suitcase you'll use to leave. He froze, staring at me like he didn't recognize the woman in front of him anymore. And maybe he didn't. I wasn't the Amanda who trusted blindly, who softened every edge for him. I was sharper now, deliberate, and every word I spoke was a blade carving him out of my life. Beside the front door, a suitcase already waited, packed neatly with the essentials I knew he wouldn't dare leave behind. I gestured toward it, my arms crossing as his face crumbled. You wanted more, Mark, I whispered, tilting my head. Extra toppings in your life, remember? Well, now you get to keep the blonde, and nothing else. The words cut deep, and I didn't flinch as his shoulders sagged under the weight of his own choices. Mark shuffled toward the door, dragging his suitcase like it weighed 100 pounds. Each step echoed through the house, the same house he thought he'd keep me small in. I followed slowly, not rushing him, letting him feel every second of his downfall. At the threshold he turned, his eyes glassy, his lips parting as if he could still talk me out of it. But I simply reached past him, opened the door wide, and waited. His silence said more than begging ever could. When the door finally clicked shut behind him, the house exhaled, and so did I. For the first time in weeks, the air didn't feel heavy, poisoned by secrets and lies. I walked back to the kitchen, poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, and slid a slice of pizza onto my plate. The crust was still crisp, the cheese pulling in long, satisfying strings. I sat at the table, savoring each bite, not just of the food, but of the victory I had crafted with my own hands. It wasn't about the blonde anymore. It wasn't even about Mark. It was about me, choosing myself, my dignity, my future over the scraps of his betrayal. I leaned back in my chair, the morning sun spilling across the table, warm and unyielding. My appetite for answers had turned into an appetite for freedom, and I'd gotten both. Revenge had been served, not in rage, but in clarity, and with every bite I tasted the life I was finally ready to claim.